Living authentically, truly, unapologetically being yourself is one of the hardest things to do. And yet, it's what we're all striving for. But why is it so difficult? Why does it feel like such a battle to live in alignment with our truth? One of the biggest reasons is that we're reorienting ourselves. For so long, we've been conditioned to be what the world wants us to be. We learn early on to follow expectations, to fit into the mold, to seek approval. But at some point, we start to feel the weight of that. We begin to wonder, who am I really? What do I believe in? What do I stand for? Living authentically means shifting from being externally led to being internally guided. It means prioritizing our own truth over societal expectations. And this isn't an act of selfishness. It's an act of self-honoring. It's giving ourselves permission to exist, to take up space, to express who we are without apology. And in doing so, we find freedom, peace, and a deep stillness within ourselves. But how do we do that? How do we begin to live authentically in a world that constantly tries to shape us into something else? The answer lies in our values. Now, before we get into values, I want to talk about money for a second, because I think it'll help us understand values in a more tangible way. Think about this. Money in itself is useless unless it's used. You can have stacks of cash locked away in a safe, but if it never gets spent, it doesn't serve its purpose. Money is only valuable when it's exchanged for something meaningful. And we all know that the amount we're willing to pay for something depends on how much we value it. If something is truly important to us, we'll pay a high price for it. But if we can't afford it, it costs us in a different way. We feel the weight of what we lack. And sometimes when we don't have enough of something we deeply desire, we start looking for shortcuts. We cut corners. We settle for a cheaper version, hoping it will still give us the same satisfaction. But it never does. This is exactly what happens when we don't honor our values. Instead of living by them, we look for easier substitutes, temporary fixes that seem to give us what we want, but ultimately leave us feeling empty. We might trade honesty for acceptance, authenticity for approval, or integrity for success. But deep down, the cost is always higher than we realize. Just like with money, when we trade away something of true value, we experience loss. Except this kind of loss isn't external. It's internal. It's the slow erosion of self-trust, the quiet ache of knowing we are living out of alignment. Now let's map that onto values. Just like money, values are not useful until they are lived. You can say you value kindness, honesty, or integrity, but if those values aren't expressed in your actions, they're just words. And here's the tricky part. Sometimes we trade our values away in exchange for approval, validation, or belonging. Think about how often we suppress our truth because we fear rejection. We tell ourselves stories to justify our choices. I have to be nice all the time, otherwise people won't like me. Or if I stand up for myself, I'll be seen as difficult. So instead, we put our values on hold. We become the person everyone expects us to be at the cost of silencing our authentic voice. But living authentically means no longer using our values as a trade-off for external validation. It means living them from the inside out. Kindness, for example, shouldn't be something we perform in hopes of getting something in return. True kindness is an extension of who we are, not a bargaining chip. When we express our values authentically, they nourish us first, before they ever reach anyone else. Let me give you an example. Imagine you buy someone a brand new phone as a gift. You're excited, thinking about how much they'll appreciate it. But when you give it to them, they just say thanks and walk away. Suddenly you feel resentment. Why? Because your kindness came with unspoken expectations. You were looking for a certain reaction, a level of appreciation that matched your effort. And when you didn't get it, you felt shortchanged. But if your kindness is truly an expression of who you are, then the act of giving is enough. You don't need anything in return because you've already fulfilled that value within yourself. This is why filtering our values through ourselves first is so crucial. If we don't, we end up feeling resentful, drained, or taken advantage of. But when we embody our values for our own fulfillment, we free ourselves. We act with integrity, not because we expect something back, but because it aligns with who we are. And here's the thing, our values also guide us in moments of conflict. When we're in a situation where we feel pressured to act against our values, we experience something called cognitive dissonance. That internal tension, that gut feeling that something is off. That's our values trying to speak to us. Imagine you see someone drop a $100 bill on the ground. If honesty is a core value for you, you instinctively want to return it. But let's say you're with a group of friends who encourage you to keep it. Now you're in conflict. Do you stay true to your values or do you conform to avoid rejection? This is where the real work of living authentically happens. It's in these small, everyday choices where we decide whether to live in alignment with our values or trade them away for temporary ease. The truth is, no one else can define how we should live our values. Each of us has our own internal measure. And we know we're living in alignment when we feel a sense of peace, when we don't need to justify our actions with elaborate stories, when we simply know we did what was right for us. And this is what it truly means to be free. Not freedom in the sense of doing whatever we want, whenever we want, but the deep, unshakable freedom that comes from knowing who we are and honoring that regardless of external influences. It's about walking through life with clarity, with integrity, with the unwavering confidence that our choices are in alignment with our deepest truths. So as you go through your day, I encourage you to ask yourself, are you living your values or are you just talking about them? Are you using them as a currency to gain approval, or are you expressing them as an extension of who you truly are? Thank you for being with me today, and if you enjoyed this episode, then please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future episodes. Until then, go well, go in peace, be kind to yourself, and see you next time.